What is up, guys? It is Chet Morgan. This is my first ever book review for YouTube, so thank you for joining in. And what a better way to start than with one of my favorite books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I'm basically going to be going through chapter by chapter, give a little bit of detail on the book as well as some of my thoughts and comments along the way. So if you do like the video, make sure you like it on YouTube, as well as leave a comment and follow me for more of your favorite books to be reviewed. So the first chapter, or first lesson, as Kiyosaki puts it, is the rich don't work for money. The chapter itself kind of starts out with him and his buddy Mike in like elementary school. And the school that they went to was kind of the rich, where the rich kids went, but they weren't rich. So naturally they were kind of outcast in that school and they wanted to become rich. So they went to Robert's dad, which in the book is Poor Dad, and they asked him, how do we become rich? And Robert's dad is a formally educated man. He was teaching at the time, but he kind of believes in that school system, and the more you learn, the more you make. So he told him what he knows, and that was basically you have to learn to make money. And the kids basically took this as literal as possible, and they went out, and at the time, this was back in the 50s, they went around town or in their neighborhood or down their street and asked for used toothpaste tubes. And at the time, toothpaste was made out of these lead, or the tubes were made out of lead. So they collected a bunch. They went back to Robert's house and they started melting it down and casting nickels out of these lead tubes. And when Robert's dad saw this, needless to say, he, nixed that idea. He's like, well, why don't you go talk to Mike's dad? Mike's dad, he knows how to make money. And Mike's dad, which come to find out later on in the story, is actually Rich Dad, and he's not formally educated. He didn't even graduate high school, and he basically is an entrepreneur, owns multiple businesses throughout town. So they went up to him and they basically asked, how do we become rich? And what Rich Dad really wanted to focus on was not, lecturing, not teaching him like in a school would. He wanted to teach him kind of life lessons the hard way. So he put him to work, and he basically said, you know what, if you want to become rich, you can work for me 10 cents an hour for 3 hours on every Saturday. And Robert was kind of on the fence because he played baseball Saturdays. But he decided, he was like, okay, I want to become rich, teach me how to become rich. After a few weeks, Robert was basically done. He was ready to quit. He was like, there's child labor laws against this, and he was fed up. And when he told Mike, Mike was like, my dad said that this would happen, and when you were ready to quit, to go talk to him. So Robert did exactly that. He went to Rich Dad, and he basically gave him a piece of his mind. As this young boy, he was like, I'm done with this. I miss playing baseball. I'm working for no money. I'm not learning how to become rich. And Mike's dad basically, this was lesson number one, and it was like life teaches you the hard way, and sometimes you have to learn the hard way. And he goes on later in the chapter to basically explain that Mike explains that none of his employees, 150, have never asked for his advice on making money at all. He basically says that your mind is the best way to make money. And basically the lesson throughout this was that you need to learn to make money. It's not just going to happen by getting a job or anything like that. You actually need to have a certain set of skills that you practice and use in order to make money. And Mike's dad goes on to explain that having money doesn't solve anything. If you don't know how to spend money properly, having more of it is not going to solve anything. That's why you see lottery winners and things like that, athletes, professional athletes. You see it all the time where they get a bunch of money and they spend a bunch of money. So having the money isn't going to help. It's knowing how to spend it, how to manage that money, that's going to basically, at the end of the day, make you rich. So after Mike's dad explained that in order to become rich, you need to learn how to manage money, he briefly explained how the government takes taxes out of employees' checks, and then the employee pays their expenses, whereas businesses, that's not the case, and that's where you become rich, is through these. He convinces Robert that, this is how you do it. Robert was back on board. He was excited to go work, and Mike's dad basically said, great, you're going to come work for me the same 3 hours, but I'm not going to pay you a dime. Literally. So Robert, takes it and he's like, okay, I know there's a lesson to be learned. So he basically agrees. So then after a few weeks of having the boys work for nothing, Mike's dad came by the shop that he had him work at. And he said, are you boys rich yet? And they were like, no, heck no. I am. And Mike's dad basically started to test him. He's like, well, I'll start paying you a wage again. And the boys knew, well, no, that's not how you become rich. But then he started to like up it incrementally. So he went up to like 50 cents, then $1, then $5, which back in the 1950s, I guess, was a pretty good wage per hour. So the boys, they really, really wanted to take the wage, but they turned him down because they knew that, that's not how you become rich. To become rich, you need to own something. But this was kind of a lesson to show that, emotions get in the way of your goals a lot of the time, especially around money. A lot of people want to be financially independent and free, but then, your employer offers you a $1 raise and you get excited and you can almost spend it before you even have it. Your mind starts going, well, now I can afford this trip, this car payment, whatever it be. Your mind wanders like that, and it's no different for the kids here, and that's kind of what that part outlined. But then another lesson here was, you working for free, you need to see an opportunity, because that's where the rich get richer. And so once they kind of had this lesson in mind, they soon saw their opportunity, and that opportunity was using the old comic books that the grocery store was selling, because they threw them away at the end of the week to make way for the new comic books. So they collected these, they opened a library, and charged the neighborhood kids, a fee to come in and read their comic books, which is taking an opportunity and making money. Did good, but it did get shut down after a fight started. So that kind of wraps up chapter 1. So the second chapter is lesson 2, why teach financial literacy. And this chapter kind of fast forwards to when Mike and Robert are older. And basically Mike took over his dad's empire that he built, and Robert retired early because his wealth is growing automatically. This chapter really digs into financial literacy, because it's not about how much money you make, but it's how long you can keep that money and for how many generations. An analogy that he uses is to get a lot of money is like building a big building, right? So he uses a skyscraper as an example. You wouldn't build a huge skyscraper on a small foundation. You'd build a small house on a small foundation. So a lot of people are trying to get these big, they want to be very, very wealthy, but they don't have that basic financial knowledge to get there. Which I kind of hit home with me, just because I think it's important. And the foundation of a house is really boring, of any building. You never see it. No one ever talks about it. They talk about the big fancy windows and the tall ceilings and whatever, but no one really talks about the foundation. But it's important. And he starts in with the first piece of financial literacy, which is the first rule. And know the difference between an asset and a liability, and to only buy assets, things that put money in your pocket instead of taking it out. Robert focuses on 2 really important financial statements, one being an income statement and the other your balance sheet. Now, very basic accounting goes into this, and it's very important because, we're dealing with numbers, and because of that, you're going to need a little bit of knowledge on these things. Now, accounting is scary for most people because it's very boring. But take it from an accountant, it is boring. But you need to know it. So basically, Robert will talk about the cash flow between the 2 statements. And he says the cash flow of a poor person is that when they get their income, it goes straight to their expenses. So it stays within their income statement, and it goes from money coming in via check, and then they spend it on taxes, utilities, food, things like that. So it comes in and it goes out. And then he talks about the cash flow of a middle class person, where their income goes to liabilities, being their house, car payment, and then then those liabilities increase their expenses because they need car insurance, gas, maintenance. They're paying interest on both their loans. So money comes in, it goes to a house and car, and those just increase their expenses. But a cash flow of a rich person is their income comes in, and then it goes straight to their assets, which generates more income, which we'll get to in a bit. But this is why more money doesn't solve any problems. So if you have that mindset or that cash flow of a poor person, the more money you have, the more expenses you're going to have. Or the more money you get, you might be able to get a cool house or a cool car, which is just going to increase your liabilities if you get payments on those. So you need to fix that way of thinking. You need to fix the way your cash is flowing in order to have any sustainable wealth. And this is where the famous controversy of this book comes from of, is your house an asset or is it not? And Robert says that it is not an asset, that a house is a liability, because even if you pay cash for your house or you spend 30 years to pay off your mortgage, you're still going to have to spend money to maintain the house. You're still going to need insurance on the house. It's always going to be taking money out of your pocket. Now, with houses and real estate, you can have that opportunity for appreciation, which is great, but that's not guaranteed. So what he's saying is basically he doesn't see how a house being an asset could be possible, because you could spend $100,000 on your house that's worth $75,000 a year later, which isn't a great asset. I kind of go back and forth on it. I think what Robert's saying is that if you're banking on your house being your biggest asset, that's not good. And there's other ways that you should focus on having sustainable wealth other than just your house. He says that assets basically should be putting money in your pocket. So if you own real estate, an asset would be buying a house and then having, a $100 payment on that house, but renting it out for $130. So you're making money. And those are just example numbers, because if your rent is $130, let me know where you live and I'm moving in. Robert also talks about in this chapter that folks get stuck in the rat race because when their income goes up, so does all their expenses. A guarantee is that if you make more money or you work longer hours, you will have to pay more in taxes automatically. And then if you don't fix your spending habits, you're going to have more expenses. And that's basically it. You want income producing assets. That is basically the bottom line of this book, is you want to spend your money on things that will return dollars to you. And that is going to be what's going to make you wealthy. And there's a quote from R. Buckminster Fuller that says, wealth is one person's ability to survive without having to work. So if you have enough money to spend the rest of your life without working, that's going to be a wealthy person. The third lesson of the book is mind your own business. So the main lesson here is that you don't want to spend your whole life simply working for someone else. For some people, that's going to be starting a small business on the side because that's, what makes sense for them. But that's not for everyone. What minding your own business kind of means is that you're focusing on your asset column. You're focusing on buying things that are going to return money to you. An increase in income will only help if you become financially secure. If you use that additional income to buy income-producing assets. And these are going to be things like stocks, bonds, you have your 401k, IRA, a lot of things that a lot of people don't really know the difference between or, know how they work. I know especially around stocks, people have a negative connotation tied to them. And if you haven't taken time to learn about them, you're not really going to know what they're about. And he talks about this a little bit later in one of the next few chapters, but having someone that knows things about stocks or bonds is going to help you greatly increase your asset column, because then one day you'll be just living off simply the money that you saved. But the key about any of it is learning. You have to know how to talk about these things intelligently in order to have conversations with people to help build that asset column. Lesson 4 is the history of taxes and the power of corporations. An interesting fact that I got from the book is that the 16th Amendment of the Constitution is what made income tax a permanent thing in the United States, and that was in 1913. And I did actually take out my copy of the U.S. Constitution, and I found that there hadn't been another amendment for the previous 50 years. So the government was ready to get their hands on some of that cheddar, you know. The tax code basically from there has always benefited businesses. It's written to enhance business, to start business, to increase business. And employees are part of businesses, but it is not written for employees, for working people. It is written for people that own businesses, and that's who's going to benefit mostly from them. So there's tax breaks to incentivize business growth. And I mean, a real fact about working is that the more you work, the more you're going to get taxed. The more hours, the more OT you put in. It feels good to get a little extra cheddar, but believe me, you're going to be paying a lot more taxes on that. Whereas a business, when you work OT for a business, the extra money that they put into keeping the building open, the extra utility bills, the extra wear on the facility wherever you're working is all written off. So the business stays open longer, and it's just more things that they're not going to be taxed on. Whereas you staying there at the business later is more things you're going to be taxed on. So it's important to understand how tax codes work and how they incentivize business and not the employee. And this is the chapter where he talks about the importance of paying your professionals well. I know you're always trying to get a good deal, you know, no matter what it is, but there is no sense in paying low money for any of your attorneys or stockbrokers, any real estate agents that you may use, because you're going to get what you pay for. And any of those professionals that are better should save you more money than they cost. And if they don't, that's a good sign that you're not working with a good professional. But that's basically what it is. You want intelligent people working for you. And then he dives deeper a little bit on the financial IQ and how it's made up basically of 4 separate pieces. And all those 4 pieces put together are what's going to get you out of the rat race. So the first one is accounting. So this is the ability to read numbers and understand them. It's kind of the boring side. It's keeping track of your expenses, knowing where money's going, focusing on that asset column, because you want to spend your paycheck on things that are going to return money to you. And if you do that long enough, that's where you're going to see wealth. The next step is investing. So this is the science and the strategy of making money. These are what stocks are you buying, what bonds are you buying, what business are you going to open up in your neighborhood. What are things that you like that you can spend money on that's going to return that money? The next is understanding markets. So this is the bigger picture, supply and demand. You know, you can open a gym in your neighborhood, but if there's already, 6 gyms, that's not good. And then the final is law. So this is with taxes, tax incentives, things that a lot of people don't inherently know. It's not really knowledge that anyone shares with each other a whole lot unless you're, or you work in that industry. So this is something that's probably boring for most people, but it's important. You're not going to just have more money coming in and not understand that taxes are going to be taken out. It's really important to know. Lesson number 5 is that the rich invent money. And this chapter is mostly about the fact that being financially secure, it takes cojones or guts. It's not just these technical skills that you need to know, but learning anything, you need to have guts to actually apply that. And the book does a really good job of explaining it. But you need to get knocked down in the real world. You can spend all day reading about certain companies to invest in. You can do, all your homework you want on understanding how to go out and get a loan to start a business in your neighborhood. But if you don't actually go out and do it, nothing's going to happen. You can know everything you want and think you're the best trader, best, business owner, best anything. But if you're not applying that, the fact is you're not. Because life is going to teach you lessons, and losing is part of learning. And that's what the chapter really talks about. Lesson number 6 is probably my absolute favorite from the entire book, and that is work to learn, don't work for money. In this chapter, it starts with a reporter that was talking or interviewing Kiyosaki, and she's talking about, how can I get my books to sell? Because she was doing an interview on him because he's got, one of these best-selling books. And she's like, I've written a few, but they haven't really done much. And he suggested that she ought to take a course in sales. And she kind of gets offended because she's this writer. She's gone to school, gotten multiple degrees in, English and literature. And that selling is kind of beneath her. And he makes a funny comment because he's like, notice that I'm a best-selling author and not a best-writing author, which I thought was interesting. But then he goes into how everyone is like one skill away from really making it. And then if you're trying to become rich, if you're trying to become rich and the only skill you know is to work hard, wake up early, stay late, and just grind, that's not going to get you very far. Because if you're not knowing, how to spend your money, how to build your asset column, working hard isn't necessarily going to get you there. So you need to make sure you're having a large variety of skills. You don't need to know a little, or you need to know a little about a lot rather than a lot about a very, very little. In today's society, we kind of tend towards specialization. Especially traditionally, we, stay with one company, know what role that is, and just focus more and more on that. You see it with a lot of industries. And a lot of people aim for a good job with good pay, good benefits. But a lot of these roles that you'll see, if you stay with, one company, one job for, 45 years or whatever until you retire, you get more and more isolated. So the more you stay in the one role, the less you know about any other systems out there, any other jobs, any other, way it's done, which doesn't help you. Learning as much as you can, about as much as you can, is what's going to really help in the long run. And then Robert talks with the students all the time. He asks them, who can make a better burger than McDonald's? And everyone kind of laughs because, probably everyone in the world can. But then he asks, why does McDonald's make millions and millions of dollars? And it generally quiets down. It's because they mastered this business systems, basically how to sell millions of burgers rather than how to make the best burger, which I think is really interesting. Sales is really hard for most people. It's really uncomfortable, especially with rejection. It's hard to say or to hear no, especially multiple times. But if you can master that skill of connecting with a person and having conversations, that's what's going to be key. Chapter 7 is overcoming obstacles. 5 main reasons financially literate people fail to make abundant cash flow are the following. The first is fear. So there's not been a rich person that hasn't lost money. So if you're scared of losing what you're earning, you got to get rid of that right away. You learn by failing, and the more you learn, the more you're going to make. The second is cynicism. So that kind of plays off fear a bit. But this deals with self-doubt, right? You're kind of cynical of, the stock market. Oh, it's going to crash and all this. And you're really just not confident that you'll be able to learn that. See why it does fail, why it succeeds, things like that. The third is laziness. And one of the biggest reasons for laziness is being too busy. Saying, I can't, right? I don't have time to work out. I'm too busy. I don't have time to learn financial literacy. I'm too busy. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to have that house? Well, I can't afford it. And what rich people do is they say, how can I afford it? Right? People don't want to take time to see all the People don't want to take time to see how things play out. What would it take in order to buy this new car and not do it on a loan, or understand how to increase cash flow, or understand basically anything new that they want to learn. People just write it off to, well, I don't have time to do that. Don't have time to run. Don't have time to eat healthy. I just don't have time. Fourth is bad habits. Habits are really, really, really important for anything. One of the most important habits is to pay yourself first. Understanding that to build your asset column, it is going to take sacrifice, and it's going to get uncomfortable, especially in the beginning. Putting money towards, a savings account or an IRA, anything like that, it's going to be less money that you can spend on food, on good food. You might have to, decrease it back, eat rice and beans for a year, but that's going to let you eat, porterhouses in the future. And then the fifth one is arrogance. So many people use arrogance to hide their ignorance. And that is very, very true, right? They write off the stock market because, well, it's going to crash. Housing market, it's going to crash. And they really don't know if that's true. They've seen it happen in the past, so probably, maybe, I don't know. You have to learn. So the final chapter is to getting started. And basically, after you read a book like this, getting started is going to be super, super easy. It's going to be, you're going to feel inspired. You're going to want to basically do whatever you can, right? It's all been laid out for you. It's easy. It's kind of got a romantic feel to it. That becoming rich is, it's clicked and now you've got it. But like anything, this journey it's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very hard. It's going to be about open-mindedness and learning in perpetuity. Every day you're going to learn something new, and you kind of have to make money management a hobby. And Kiyosaki breaks it down into 10 kind of steps that you can take in order to become more financially free. And the first is to find a reason greater than reality, and this is the power of spirit. He busts down his purpose into a series of wants and don't wants, and he starts with his don't wants, right? So Kiyosaki was like, I don't want a house in the suburbs like my parents did. I don't want a safe job with, that I'm going to work 40 hours a week at just to get by. He didn't want that. And his wants were, he wanted to travel, he wanted to retire young. So it's things way out there that you want and you can work towards every single day. The second is make daily choices. So this is the power of choice. It focuses a lot on your habits, specifically spending habits. People write off being rich when the road gets tough, right? When it comes to, maybe budgeting for groceries every week. It's not fun. It's definitely not fun after, a day's worth of work. Some people have kids, so trying to do that and then find time the time that they're going to find is going to be their time that they spend watching Netflix or relaxing. And it's going to take sacrifice. It's not romantic, but it's these choices that you make each day that are going to help. The third is to choose friends wisely, the power of association. And I've heard a quote, I'm sure everyone's heard it, where you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. And Kiyosaki talks about, hang around people that you want to be like. So if you hang around people that barbecue, you're probably going to pick up tips and tricks on grilling. He talks about hanging around people that are financially set. You're going to learn things from being around them, because that's what people that are financially set generally kind of talk about it. Not bragging, but they conversate around their hobbies, and that's one of their hobbies. The fourth is master a formula, then learn a new one. So this is the power of learning quickly. And things are always changing. Never be content with the information that you have in your own head. Learn in perpetuity. The fifth one is pay yourself first. The power of self-discipline. So the toughest and most important step is definitely this one. It's important to pay your bills, but you need income-generating assets, and you need to stay out of debt. That's going to be one of the biggest ones, because you're always going to be spending money on that. That's, in order to build an asset column, you need to sacrifice. Number 6 is pay your brokers well. And this is the power of good advice. So this goes back to, you're not going to know everything about stocks. You're not going to know everything about opening a business. You're not going to know everything about everything, The idea is learn a little about a whole lot of things so you can have conversations with people that are more intelligent about you in those fields. So you pay them well because they're going to save you money. Number 7 is be a giver. The power of giving something for nothing. Oh, so this deals with Robert's kind of his investing philosophy, which I thought was an interesting part of the book because it's short and it's brief. But he basically, if he puts his money in something risky and it increases in value, he's going to take out the money that he put in, and then everything above that is just kind of free money that he got from the return. That's just number 7. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but that's just what he's got in the book. Number 8 is use assets to buy luxuries, the power of focus. So your income you use to buy assets, especially in the beginning. Those assets, once they generate enough income to buy, fancy watches and jewelry, cars, houses, that's when you can buy them. It's after those assets take care of the things you want. Number 9 is choose heroes, the powers of myth. And this is basically when it's time to shine, pretend that you're someone who's already done it. I know, like when my nephew, who's 4 years old, dresses up like Superman, he doesn't think he's dressing up like Superman, he is. Or when he's, pretending to be a policeman, he feels like he is the law, and generally he is. But it's really just put yourself in someone's shoes that's already done it, and just do it. And then the 10th and final is teach and you shall receive, and this is the power of giving. Whenever you feel like you need something, give it, and it will come, and it will return in buckets full. Smiles, money, respect, whatever it may be, that is the key. And that is the end of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I hope you got a little bit more from this than you would have by just reading the book. The idea is just to kind of expand on what I read and kind of open the floor for you guys to explore your own thoughts as well on the book. So again, leave your comments below. Any feedback is appreciated. If you liked it, you didn't like it, what you did and didn't. So go ahead and leave that below. Always subscribe, follow for more. This next week I'm going to be reading the How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So go ahead, stay tuned. That's going to be coming out this Friday. And thank you.